to talk about the extremely important topic of mental health in the tech workplace. Fluctuating levels of mental health is something that I've had to deal with throughout most of my adult life. And what I've always found is that difficult times are made so much easier when you have that level of support from all areas of your life, and that includes the workplace. Lockdown has been increasingly difficult on people's mental health, perhaps even more so for those working in tech, because they've been having to support the running of businesses while organizations lean on them to enable remote working. There's also been a bit of an increase on that always on culture that technology so often brings, which is terrible for work-life balance and then by extension people's mental health as well. If you have questions during the panel, drop them in the Q&A. Danny is going to have a monitor of those, and I'm going to ask her to be my lovely assistant later, and she's going to bring across the audience questions for us. So, panel, before I get to the nitty-gritty of it, I'm going to ask each of you to give us a 30-second introduction of yourselves. We're going to leave the holding slide up while you do that so everyone can get a feel of who everyone is before the discussion starts. So if we could start with Flavilla, if you could just give a 30-second introduction of who you are.
All right, so my name is Flavilla. Hello, everybody. So glad to do this talk. And I am the founder of Three Colors, which is a creative branding and marketing agency. People also know me as the founder of TLA, Tech London Advocates Black Women in Tech, which was created just 1 year ago. And we almost have 1,000 members, and I'm super excited about what is coming for 2021. I'm also the podcast host of Tech Brains Talk, so I'm very involved in technology. And I do a lot of things, but it's not so much about me today, so I'm going to stop right here.
Brilliant, thank you. James?
Hi everybody, I'm James Evans. I'm the CEO of Douglas & Gordon. I'm glad to see that I'm completely outnumbered on the panel today by ladies to guys, so all good. But look, Douglas & Gordon is a central London and West London real estate business. And mental health is a hugely important part of our culture here at the company. A lot because the jobs that we are doing is incredibly stressful, not just normal people's jobs in everyday life, but the nature of the business that we're dealing with, the customers and the consumers that we are interacting with at any one time are probably at a heightened level of stress and anxiety because they are moving. And so it's quite a nice balance for us to sort of see how things work internally and with our customer and client basis. And finally, from a technology point of view, we're a company that we believe we are currently and moving very much forward into the technology space within real estate. And I think we learned a lot from the COVID-19 restrictions of where and how we can operate as a business. So thank you for inviting me.
Thank you for joining. Sophie?
Hi Claire.
Hi.
Hi everyone. I'm Sophie. I'm the founder of a kids media company called Bright Little Labs, and we make stuff for kids like cartoons and animations and books and games to teach kids about 21st century skills like computer science and critical thinking, with a focus of inclusive role models. And yeah, it started on Kickstarter in 2016, and we since got backing with Warner Media and Cartoon Network, and resilience and sort of emotional well-being is something that we care about a lot as a company, but also we care a lot of it care about how kids think about it and what they're learning about it. So thanks.
Brilliant. Thank you. Sheree?
Hey everybody, I'm Sheree Atchison, and I am an award-winning global diversity, equity and inclusion leader. I've been doing this work for about 8 or 9 years, and I'm currently Peacon's Global Director of Diversity, Equity and Inclusion. Previously, I was at Monzo Bank leading their inclusion, and previously before that at Deloitte UK. I am a Forbes contributor on all things DE&I, and I have a book coming out next year with Kogan Page on demanding more from your leaders on diversity, equity and inclusion.
Thank you very much. And Celine?
So hi everyone, thanks for having me. I am the Regional Vice President of Sales for the UKI and Emerging Markets, which is pretty much the rest of the world, based out of our Dublin office with Zendesk. I joined Zendesk actually only about 5 months ago, as they've started the process really to grow out their regional leadership and investment in the region. So if you've worked your maths back, you'll have realized that I joined the organization right in the height of lockdown, and that has meant that I have not actually met a single person from my organization in person. So obviously the experience of that has been interesting. So you kind of get a first-hand experience of what the impact of fully remote working has been on employees. So very interesting times, and I'm delighted to be here. I see Sherry is the same. Yeah, I think there's a lot of people that kind of share that view, but it's I think giving me a different perspective on the impact of remote working. So great to be here.
Brilliant. And we can probably touch on that a little bit in later on in the chat, because that's something that can probably impact, you know, like your mental health and your feeling of support in an organization as well. As I said, when I got in touch with you, if you want to address a point, it would be cool if I can wave and then pass it over to you, because otherwise you don't want to end up all talking over each other. I think the first question that we should try and tackle is what organisations and colleagues could do to advocate for those struggling with their mental health and support good mental health practices for employees, especially during a pandemic where everybody might be feeling a little bit more pressured or a little bit more isolated. Is there anyone who wants to tackle that question first? Sheree, you're nodding your head. Yeah?
I mean, yeah, sure. Yeah, what I think is really important in when we talk about mental health, and especially mental health in the middle of a global pandemic, is everybody in your organization, and especially your senior leadership, must have an understanding that we are not working from home right now. We are existing in our houses, trying to balance literally everything at the same time whilst there is a global pandemic, and we happen to be doing that at home. So this is not the same working from home that we were doing previously at the start of the year, where maybe you work from home on a Friday or a Monday, so you have less of a commute. This is literally to save lives, not just your own, but those around you and the people that you potentially come in contact with. And so that takes a toll on your mental health, because it's a very different experience. It also takes a toll whenever businesses don't appreciate and accept that it is two very different situations. And even referring to it as working from home, whilst yes, it's quick to say, it's actually not very truthful, and it's kind of facetious. Now, what I think organizations need to do, have very frank conversations about that at a company-wide level, but also ensuring that you have trained and appropriate people partners, people managers, etc., adequately trained to deal with the things that are coming through right now, as well as the people that need to look after those folks as well. And that means really understanding how mental health affects people in different ways, ensuring that, for example, ethnicities, cultures, etc., are not forgotten in this. Quite often you will see the majority of, for example, HR business partners, HR leads are white, and if they haven't had appropriate education on dealing with, for example, ethnicity related issues around mental health and so on, especially given the racial tensions, etc., that have always existed but are coming to life more and more and more, if they're not appropriately trained to deal with that, then the people that are affected are those that have already been detrimentally affected before. And that means having a really robust process and policy in place for people to get the help they need, whilst knowing that they can trust that they will talk to someone and their team lead that has been trained and isn't someone who's just, you know, trying to find their way in doing this, because it's too dangerous and it's too risky.
Has anybody else on the panel found that as well? Flavilla, can we go with you first?
No, because my experience is very different from everybody else, because you can see I'm sitting in my office. There's no one but me over the last couple of months. So my team has always been super hybrid. Hybrid is very different from remote. So hybrid means that you still come to the office, but you don't have visibility to come every day. I was even went from hybrid to fully remote. And so I think when it comes to dealing, and again, I probably see from a business owner point of view, has always been allowing. So I think as a leader, we expect to be strong and know exactly how to handle things. And I think this open conversation that I've always had with my team allow them to know that they can also show some part of their vulnerability. So we would talk obviously from a business level, but also talking from a personal level in terms of how things are going. For example, at the end of every week, we always finish with what is something that you're very proud of accomplishing, which is super key. So it's like, what are you doing every weekend? I think it's important that we know that they are not just, working in isolation. They don't obviously, everybody had a bit of a Zoom exhaustion at some point, going from one meeting to another. It's knowing that I have never been focusing on their input, but much more on the input, but much more on the output. So really, what result are we expecting at the end? So they have that flexibility to use how they want to use their time with as much flexibility as they can. And I think we understand as well that because you're working from home, especially people who have kids, they need to readapt themselves. So I don't expect necessarily to have like be there at 9 o'clock on the dot. You know what you're doing in terms of more take ownership of your work and find a way to really adapt it to the new lifestyle that you find yourself into. And I think it's important, as we say, from what I've always valued is that, that openness in terms of how we feel as leaders, and therefore they also know that the door is open to have this conversation. And you see how when one person starts talking about how they feel about the situation, somebody else just leads and says something else. And that's one thing that we need to show a bit more. I think we always need to be perfect as leader, but you say, what, also I have a lot of things that I have to deal with, and know that they can have this open conversation. And as Sherry said, it's important as managers to know exactly how to be, touching on the emotional element, not just work, but be also human and have that with your employees.
Yeah, so leading by example doesn't always mean leading absolutely perfectly. You're a human too, and you have to let other people have that space to be human as well. Celine, did you have a point to make?
Yeah, I wanted to cap what Flavilla and Cherie said with that, what we don't do is we don't kind of acknowledge, certainly I can see across the panelists, and I'm assuming the same of participants, but I would probably hazard a guess to say none of us, and nor have any of the organizations that we're affiliated with lived through a global pandemic in the past. So we're kind of all learning as we go as well, right? So as Flavilla said, we're not going to get it perfect. I think the key is over communication, because what you'll find is people's anxiety will be driven, or the main driver of that will be the silence and the lack of communication. Everybody's in this unknown world. We're not going to get it perfect, but putting that out there and kind of having those conversations, being open about it and being open about our own challenges, just, gives people the space and the forum to be able to air their views as well. So, it really is important that we understand, or we acknowledge that we're all learning together.
Absolutely. And one of the things that Cherie was saying about working from home not being the same as it was before the pandemic sort of encourages this always on culture, a difficulty maintaining work-life balance. How can companies and individuals look after mental health at this time, where there might be this ongoing pressure to work more or to show presenteeism in a different way because not everybody can be in the office, or if you are in the office, there might not actually be anyone else there to see that you're there anyway? Is there a way that we can make sure that we're giving ourselves that balance? James?
I mean, I think everyone's made great points, and the communication one for me is absolutely pivotal. Any good leadership or any good structure is around, is there clear, candid communication? And that's not always from the top. That's actually, if it starts at the top, that's great, but it then needs to manifest itself and become cultural throughout an entire organization. And when we took all of our businesses back home in the eye of the storm of the pandemic, we have thousands and thousands and thousands of tenants and landlords and people that were planning to move. And as you can imagine, that created this enormous level of anxiety, not just with our staff, but with the general public. And so you can imagine our normal volume of emails and messages and calls went, up 300-400%. And I became very aware very quickly that my staff were being asked to do things that was well out of their parameters, well beyond what was capable. And because we employ such wonderful people, and I'm incredibly lucky to have them all, they just kept going. And through very good communication that we implemented, it became very clear very early that I needed to make a call to the whole company that no, come the end of the day, whatever the time that is, you have to switch off. I wish I'd caught it days, weeks earlier, but I'm glad we caught it. And it was also being really clear from a leadership point that I'm okay with you all stopping at this time. You have a life, you need some downtime. Batteries eventually go flat and they need to be recharged. Human beings are no different. And there's a time when we just need to plug back in and re-energize. And then it was about the communication of setting up the days absolutely correctly and making, and we fundamentally just replicated a normal office-based day, just as we are all doing now, and it worked wonderfully. Everybody tuned in for their normal morning meetings as they would in a normal office. We did encourage people to, get dressed properly, comb their hair, dress as they would normally. I did see, it gave me a lovely insight to how people really live their lives. I've seen lots of different pajamas, which was lovely. But the reality is we looked at each other, we remembered who we were, we smiled at each other, we laughed, we joked, we created that culture. And what manifested itself was, it's okay, we're all in this together. And Claire, I loved your point. Sorry, it might have been true, apologies. None of us have been in this pandemic before, so we're all learning on the job. And, we get things right, we get things wrong, and it's absolutely fine to get it wrong. Try not to get it wrong twice, but, and I think that communication thing is critical, but people have got to know when they can switch off. That's critical.
Yeah, so active communication, and then another leading by example, another point on leading by example. Sophie, your company is smaller than some of the others here, so I wondered if that sort of always on mentality is something that you've struggled with in a different way.
I think actually in some ways it's been easier as a small company. There's about 10 of us. So when Cherie was talking about sort of making sure that people are correctly trained and, having the right people in place to support other people, I was like, oh gosh, we don't have that. But where we know that our competency stops, we're really good at outsourcing. So I want to be supportive and have open conversations, but we also have a budget so that everybody can see a counsellor if they want extra support and get sort of like genuine expertise. But as a small company, I don't know, a lot of the processes that we had allowed for flexibility, and we've had to really rely on them now that we're apart. So for example, like really simple things on Slack, we have, you can work between whatever, like 7 and can't remember, but we just all write our hours on Slack, and you have to write your hours, and when your hours aren't there, you're not working. And that's like a simple thing that you can do that brings boundaries to your work. I think most of us do a fake commute in the morning, so we've all discussed it quite openly, and we have routines that help to structure a day and have a focus on the fact that you can just stay at your desk all day like this. And I think this is big company or small company, you sort of forget to move. And so like things like that, which we can encourage open conversations. But I actually don't think that I think it might be easier as such a small company. We have a stand up every morning at 9:30 for 5 minutes, and everybody can see each other and just have a quick check-in. It's not the same as being together, but I don't know how you do that in a company of 200 plus people. And so basically I don't think it's been that bad because we're small.
Yeah, maybe changing out of my pajamas is something I should incorporate into my day. It's not something I've been doing at all.
Why? Does it make you work better?
Maybe it will make me feel more ready to work. You brought up one of the things that I wanted to ask about, which was about, this the difference between having an official strategy for mental health and an official process to go through, and then having sort of like a more relaxed process that like managers might address on a case by case basis. Which do you think is better for people's mental health, or is there benefit in both? Sophie, do you want to go first?
Yeah, because I think I feel quite strongly about this, that you, like whatever size you are, I think having an explicit policy that you've thought through and that people can access is extremely important. However good your sort of unofficial support or conversation or level of communication is, I think that being transparent is empowering to everybody in your organization, and it provides a framework for people to know what's on offer and how to have those conversations. So I don't think that the informal can ever replace the formal. yeah, so I really believe in the formal, and then obviously the culture helps. Like I sometimes will take a day off work because I'm anxious, which I see it's the same as saying I've got the flu today.
Mm-hmm.
I say it to everybody around me because I sort of don't want it to be a thing that I'm ashamed about. But that's not formal. Like formally, there are ways that you can deal with it. There's help that's on offer, and I think that needs to be extremely clear and transparent.
Okay, absolutely. Shuri, do you want to?
Yeah, I think that's incredibly important, because what happens if you don't have something formal in place is that those that benefit the most from the informal policies will be those that are more comfortable or confident in asking or being clear. And we know that, for example, those with different disabilities or neurodiversity, etc., that may not be those people. And if we are not creating something that is incredibly unvague, what is the opposite of not vague, whatever that is, very clear and easy to understand, then things are up for discussion that shouldn't be and shouldn't need to be. It should be very clear to understand. If you want to get mental health support, this is the resources we provide, the different insurance we can provide, how to access the free counselling sessions and so on. And then that's bolstered by, I guess, almost like the culture piece that Sophie's talking about, the the informal, I'm taking a day because I'm feeling anxious, or I'm struggling today, so I'm taking this day off, and so on. Almost the embedding the mental health support into the culture. But if you only have that, then the people that really, really need that support, that maybe aren't as confident in saying those things or asking, simply won't get it, and that's just not good enough.
Yeah, it can even be really difficult, like Sophie said, just to say, I'm taking a sick day today because I'm not well. In the same way that if you had a headache or a migraine or the flu, like Sophie said, you would just say, I don't feel well today. I can't work. And sometimes with mental health, there's this sort of pressure to pretend that you're okay because it's something that, to a certain extent, for a limited amount of time before it completely overwhelms you, you can ignore, Celine, did you have a point on this? Official versus unofficial?
Yeah, I think, I mean, I'd echo what everybody else has said. I think the framework is almost like a schooling system. It like covers the basics, but it doesn't allow for anything that's outside of the norm. So I happen to have a teen who is autistic, on the high end of the autistic spectrum, but that makes me hyper aware of the way I converse with him, or how we interact in our day-to-day is very different to how I would interact with my other child. And so I think where the formal versus informal comes in is that the informal allows us to accommodate those kind of peripheral needs that maybe just aren't answered by formal mechanisms. So, doing things like, we have a lot of informal initiatives that we run in Zendesk, like wellbeing Wednesdays, so to give people, I think it was James mentioned earlier about kind of getting ahead of the curve and telling people to stop at a point. So giving people the space so that they don't feel, I think the onus is on an organization to push these agendas, so people don't feel uncomfortable in voicing them. Like James with the pajama scenarios, I've seen people sit in their children's bedrooms because that's where they can kind of get time out. So I think it's super important that we have a blend of both. I think that I won't say the informal is the icing on the cake, because it's a necessary, it's not negotiable, but I think it's where we allow for variances or variables with people, right, that are inevitable.
Awesome. And do Flavilla and James, do either of you have an additional point to make, or James, do you want to go?
I'll super quick, because I completely agree with everyone's points. I think they're bang on. I think with people, everybody is different and everyone copes with things in a completely different way. And my belief is very much with Sophie, there has to be a very sensible, formal, correct procedure. But at the same time, I'm a big believer it's not one or the other, it's definitely both. And I desperately try to make sure that we are preventative in this rather than just trying to cure it when it becomes a challenge. Now, sometimes clearly that is well out of our hands, and sometimes it's got nothing to do with work, it's people's personal points. And a successful team would be one where the relationships are built on really strong foundations of trust. And when we're working with all of our staff, my view is it's not, we're lucky, we're a lovely family run business. So we have family values as a business too. And so my view is we treat each other, there's no hierarchy, we're all in this together, everyone is equally important, we've got to be. And if we look after each other like our family, then it actually works quite well. And so it's about taking a genuine interest in your people, getting to really, really know them, not just know them as an individual, but know them, their family, what goes on. And that builds an immense amount of trust to them, to you. And in a way that can prevent many of the challenges that may come up, because you'll see the warning signals that there's a bit of burnout or there's some anxiety, and everyone deals with things very differently. And I think that is crucially important. And so from the day someone arrives in an organization, it's about setting out the boundaries of what is expected, what is not expected, what the protocols are, with all of the different things that this wonderful conference has brought together. And then hopefully you can prevent some of the challenges, but when they do come up, there's a very clear formal process. And as Cherie said, it goes into the way your insurance policies work and your helplines and all your mental first aiders.
Yeah, mental
I
first
wanted to say
aiders.
something, because
Yeah,
I think
go
I
on.
didn't want to say something, but I thought I'd share this because it's super important, and it was the best advice that was given when I started, managing other people. Say people don't work, people don't work for you. You work for them to make sure that they stay. So if you go with that mindset of making sure that it's like your customers, you do your best for them to stay as long as possible, and it's the same thing. So really, again, same thing, understanding everybody's personal agenda, what they're trying to achieve, will help you even as a manager to really have a bigger picture. So same thing, when people are dealing with situations such as this, the more you try to put your employees' best interests at heart, then they do their best. So again, there's just so many great things. That's all I want you to share.
Yeah, I think it's a really good point as well, because if you don't make people feel included and welcome, then they'll find somewhere else to work. James, you brought up the point of mental health first aiders, which is something that I actually am really interested in. Is that something that you have in your company?
Yes, we do. Yes, we do. So when we do an induction process for an entire week, so when anyone joins the company, their first week is they don't go out into the front offices or into the business at all. They totally understand what we do. Bless them, the first meeting they have is with me.
Yep.
Hopefully I'm not in my pajamas, but and we set out the guidelines and what the business is about and the vision and all of that. And then they progressively go through that week learning every little bit about the business. So they come out at the end of that, before they start their job, feeling hopefully very relaxed. It's like, the anxiety hopefully dissipates. That's not to say it's not going to be, a little bit stressful. That life can be stressful. And that training week is done by the training department. All of the training department are mental first aiders, and they've been through the right courses to do that. And the reason behind that is because when someone joins our organisation, or any organisation, it's the training department they meet first. So they'll just have a mental affiliation with that group, and they tend to be the more holistic group of people. So at any time through their career, they can loop back in with that person. All of our HR department are mental first aiders, and then all of the senior management team are. And the main principle by that goes back to that sort of preventative measure. It's about, if you really understand the people who work, Flavia, who work for you, that you work for, sorry, I get that right, then actually you can start to see if things start to become a little bit unusual. Are the attitudes or the behaviors changing? Are they turning up a little bit late? Are they leaving? Are they gaining weight? Are they losing weight? Are they becoming a little bit snappy? Are they becoming a bit more reclusive? And you can pick these things up if you genuinely understand your people and you really care about them like family members. And then we can step in either through a holistic approach one-on-one, or we can give them guidance to go and get more professional help through, as Cherie said, through insurance policies and psychiatrists that we're very happy to prepare and offer for people.
Okay, thank you for filling me in on that. It was really interesting. I like that. I'm going to call on my lovely assistant, Dania, now to pop up into the conversation. Hello. How are you?
Awesome.
Been busy?
Sorry, the chat is blowing up slightly. We've had some really good questions. If I could kick off with one from Natalie Gray. Hey, Natalie. Do the panel have any experience, good or bad, of using technology or apps to help support employees' mental health?
As in using apps, an app that you recommend to your employees for support of mental health, is that what they mean?
Yeah, good or bad. What kind of, can you recommend any technology that can be used, or any recommend any technology that shouldn't be used?
Okay.
I guess one of the things that I've used, and certainly have seen used in other organizations I've worked at, is Headspace, which is quite good. I think some people here probably have used it as well, which is around meditation and sort of helping you get better sleep, focusing on and managing that. There's another app, I can't remember the name of it right now actually, but it helps you track how you feel every single day as well. Where, you know, I'm feeling 2 out of 10 today, 5 out of 10, etc., whatever it is. And then I find that very useful to look back on. I've used that on myself, because I think one of the things that is easy to slip into as well is forgetting actually how things felt in the moment, which then sometimes can either snowball into a negative sphere, or also potentially, you know, the other way, where everything seems great, but maybe you want to have a broader and deeper understanding. And I think there's a lot of great apps that allow you to do that. But certainly Headspace is one that I would recommend.
Yeah, other people move their hands as well. Sophie first, were you going to recommend Headspace also?
Yeah, I love Headspace. I get a lot from it. There's one called Calm, which I know some people like, which I think is quite similar, but I use Headspace. The thing, and we've tried out different things, like Slack have got a lot of add-ons, so you can have Slack coffees, which pairs you randomly up with someone else that says, right, you know, like go and brew a cup of tea and have a coffee with this person. We have not found that useful. It just sort of, it comes at a time which interrupts people, and actually people can arrange their own Slack coffee. So that didn't work for us. And BetterHelp, which was an online counselling offer, which we offered to everybody. People didn't get a lot out of that. And actually, in the end, people preferred to find their own counsellor. But everybody's different. Lots of people have said that, but that's just for us, sort of some things that worked and some things that haven't worked.
Okay, fab. James?
I mean, I think Headspace is great, actually, as well. I'm a big one on that. From an organisational point, we started to use a Asana, a platform, which just helps people be more organised, which I think, again, is that preventative thing. If people can be more organised and get what they need to be done within the parameters of their working day, that's great. But actually, that's a temporary measure, because my long-term view is to build a technology system within the company that gives people very clear, informative task lists so they can do their jobs within the parameters that they do, but also helps self-learn if the platform that we develop shows where pain points in their business are, or where they're succeeding, where they're failing, it actually pre-populates and helps them become more successful. That then ties in, and I'll be super fast on this, but one of the other things that we were very clear about is trying to professionalize the property industry, because in my view, it's not very professional. It really has a long, long way to go. And when you take any genuine professional, take a professional sports team, a brilliant athlete, Kelly Holmes will put around her own psychologists, her nutritionists, her physiologists. She will literally surround herself by the very, very best people to make her as best as she possibly could be. And in business, we don't do that. And so the fine line between success and failure in sport is just definitive. You win or you lose. And in business, there's lots and lots of hiding places, and there's hiding places for our staff, whether in a good place or a bad place. So we employed a wonderful company called Health is Wealth. And that was about looking at our staff's nutrition, looking at our staff's mental well-being, and really encompassing all of that piece. Right down, it sounds a bit geeky, but doing DNA checks, clearly only on people who wanted or intolerance checks to see, it transpired that I'm not very good with eggs. It gives me an irritation on my skin, and I've spent 40 years, never knew that. The minute I took away eggs, bang, there you go. There was other things that made my performance and my energy levels drive up. And there is a really key balance between nutrition, sleep, well-being and mental health. The correlation is absolutely bang on. And so as an organization, why are we not investing more into these absolutely clear and correct things to help our staff? The technology piece behind that is, if we could develop a way, and one of the things that we're looking at, which is a bit outside of the box at the moment, is, if we can find a way to help our people be more fit, more healthy, more agile, and actually healthy body, healthy mind, healthy life, etc. I think holistically that really works as a company. So we're really, so I'm absolutely all over. If anyone has any sort of things that are working for them in that space, we would love to hear all about it. It's very important to us. Cool,
thank you. And Flavilla, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I think we've tried some of the things I mentioned before, but my team is so different, so not everybody likes everything. But one thing that we know that we're all in common is food and also music. So we could create, for example, our own Spotify playlist where people can just share the music. It's a good way to stay connected. I think one thing that we always try to do, because people don't know, but I actually have a team scattered across, most of them are in London, but also I actually employ somebody in Leicester, another person in Lebanon. So I'm very much comfortable with distance. So I believe that you can stay connected no matter where you are. So that's one thing that we always had. And for example, the first time we saw you so accustomed to having team lunch together, and we haven't had that in such a long time. So we try to do breakfast mornings and stuff like that. But yes, when it comes to technology, what has really helped, I think music is great. I've tried them meditation. I'm very for meditation, but not everybody has their own way of relaxing. So the way we do it is I kind of share and try different things every now and then, and people share in which one, and we give each other a review in terms of what works. It's about, I think by nature, we are highly creative, and it's just about, trying and see what works, and the fun, making it fun along the way, which is super, super important for me and them.
Absolutely, thank you. Dania, do we have any more questions?
We do. So we have a question from Daisy Pledge, a really good one. When you talk about mental health first aiders, if you're noticing a change in behaviour, how do you start those potentially uncomfortable and very sensitive conversations?
So how do you address with someone who might not have come forward to say that they're having, mental health issues, but you can start to see the changes in them, and you just want to check in with them before things start to snowball and go wrong? Celine, can I come to you on this one?
Yeah, I think that's a really difficult question. And the difficulty comes with the individual, where they may actually not even be aware of it themselves. So I think for me, from a personal approach, I usually start with maybe addressing an acknowledgement of that change in behavior. You obviously then have to judge the conversation past that point in terms of how they interact with that. But what I found is I have a lot of personal, as a leader, I have a lot of personal experience that I've had just in my own personal life. And I often draw from that so that I can, open or create an environment where people feel safe to share from their perspective. So most people that know me, certainly even in a leadership capacity, they'll know that I'm very open with sharing. That I've not had my own personal struggles, but I mentioned earlier I have a child that's autistic, and they're also transgender, and that in its own right has brought lots of mental health issues that we've had to address as a family. So I think what I try to do is I try to share on a personal level so that I can create an environment that makes them feel safe. I probably would deflect to James. I think it was a great initiative to build up a repository of mental health first aiders. It's something that we do in Zendesk, and certainly experience that I've had in previous organizations, but never as a responsibility of a leadership team. I think it's a phenomenal approach to first aiders. We talk a lot about what we see as core skills of leadership, and really I think that needs to step up and step out. So yeah, I think it's a very difficult question to answer. It's very specific to the situation, but they would be my two approaches. So, you know, not go direct, but open up for a conversation about potential change in behavior. If you don't get engagement, maybe open up from a personal experience to see if that helps them to engage a bit more.
Yeah, create a safe space for them to share.
Absolutely.
Brilliant. Any more questions, Danielle?
Well, I think that's actually all we have time for, Claire.
Oh no.
Sorry.
That's okay.
We
Thank
do
you.
have more questions, so perhaps we can pick them up later on and answer them directly after the conference.
Yeah. Okay. Let's see if we can work on that. Thank you so much, panel. I'm just so overwhelmed by everything that we've covered, if I'm honest. But I'm really glad to have had this chat with you, and thank you so much.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.